Zoot Suit Riot.
Exactly, the Zoot Suit Riot. So what was the root cause? What was at the center of why this even happened in the first place?
Today we're here with Ms. Castellon to talk about the Zoot Suit Riots. Before we talk about the riots, we would like to know a little bit about you. One of the first things is, what schools did you attend?
So for high school, I attended Rialto High School in Southern California. And then I went to Brown University, which is located in Rhode Island. I went from one side of the country to the other. And then I got my master's in teaching credential at Stanford University.
From that point on, what made you feel like you wanted to go into teaching?
Oh, that's a good question. So when I got to Brown, I realized that that was really my first time where I was able to compare my high school experience to the experiences of other students. So, for example, the high school that I went to was predominantly Latino and African American. And to be honest, when I got to Brown, I didn't really feel prepared, right? I struggled a lot, and the expectation at my high school was not to go to college, right? It was the expectation that we're going to get them through high school. They may or may not even make it to high school graduation. And I really think that because I wasn't pushed by my teachers, that really motivated me to go into an educational setting, such as the classroom, to show that I wasn't the exception to the rule, right? Because even when I got to Brown, I heard that my teacher said, oh yeah, well, she got into to school because she's brown, right? Or, oh, you know, she's different than the others. The other ones end up pregnant or end up in gangs, but that's not true. That's just stereotypes that I think they had in their head. And I wanted to return to a setting like the high school that I went to prove that I wasn't the exception to the rule, because I know that everyone who believes in themselves and has the ganas is capable of achieving college, their college dreams, and going even beyond that. So that's why I went into the classroom as a teacher.
Speaking on race, do you feel like you've really been discriminated against?
And there was an instance at Brown, actually, not on campus, but the nearest Walmart was in Massachusetts, which goes to show you how small Rhode Island is, right? Because it was 30 minutes away, but it was still in another state. But I was with my aunt who came to visit, and we were walking out of the Walmart, and then we heard somebody say, hey, why don't you two grab a towel? And we were like, what? Like, why are they saying, you know what I mean? And like, I was like, oh, maybe they're just talking to someone else. And then they said, no, you two, yes, we're talking to you. Why don't you guys grab a towel, dry your backs? So that was, even though they did not directly call us wetbacks, right? It was, they were insinuating, get a towel because you are a wetback. So that was my sophomore year of college. And I think that that's an instance that stood out to me because I really didn't think that I would be directly called that ever, right? And to have that happen in a place that was different in context was really, it really opened my eyes.
It's been full of discrimination. Do you think that the racial tension that existed during World War II, which was the time era that the Zoot Suit riots happened in, do you think that was one of the main reasons that it would happen?
So I think historical context definitely matters, right? When we look at the economic, social, and political conditions of a time, I definitely think that that influences the way people think about people that may be quote-unquote different or perceived as different. And I think that, you know, if we look at times of war, yes, I think that does influences the way that people are perceived. If we look at 9/11, right, I think that there was a specific group of people that were targeted because of the way that 9/11 was shown in the press, and I think that also has something to do with it. So yes, definitely wartime, but I also think when we look at the Zoot Suit riots, it's interesting to see how the media kind of shaped the way that people were thinking about Zoot Suiters and who was to blame, quote unquote, in the Zoot Suit riots, right? And at the time, the press the newspapers were coming out with daily kind of news about pachucos, pachucas, zoot suiters, right? So if somebody's seen as a bad guy, then that definitely influences kind of what happens, the trend that happens throughout the riot. So I also think the press had something to do.
Carnal, póngase abusado, ya los tiempos han cambiado, usted está muy agüitao y está mucho atravesado. Antes se bailaba el swing